Thanks, Mary Ellen. And thank you, Derek, for the invitation, and all of you for your good work. And welcome to the South Interior Building. Just for a little bit of history, because we are not only about the beautiful great outdoors, we're also about America's history and culture, particularly through the National Park Service. But this building, the South Interior Building, and this room was the map room for World War II. So this is the place where the maps actually were hung from the ceiling and then retracted and hidden in between meetings so that World War II could be planned out. And in the second floor in the southwest corner office, which is actually the daytime office of Joe Pizarczyk, who runs the Office of Surface Mining, is the place where the Marshall Plan was signed, and is also a place where the Joint Chiefs of Staff met during World War II. So you're in a historic building, and this is a building that we hope will be renovated in the not too distant future, including perhaps a front door for the National Mall through the entrance. You probably came in the front door. So welcome to Interior, and thanks to all of you for the work that you do to engage people across this country in the great outdoors. As we know, outdoor recreation, solitude, activities, renew our souls as human beings and are essential, I think, to our well-being. And part of my job and part of all of your jobs is to make that happen for all American people. And as I look out across this room, this is not atypical. I do not see the face of the United States of America here. I see a subset, which is largely Caucasian, not 100%, but certainly not reflective of our population. And that is something that we all need to work hard on if we're going to have support for the great outdoors in the future, just like we have today. So I just want to acknowledge my boss's support for Great Outdoors Month. It's terrific to have his support, as we did in America's Great Outdoors when my predecessor, Ken Salazar, was here. Of course, Tom Vilsack was still here. They worked closely on that together with others. But we do have a leader in President Obama who's been supportive of these efforts, and while he is not as comfortable in the wilderness as I might be, he appreciates the wilderness a great deal, and I think his trip to Alaska was a good indication of that. Was it last summer? I guess it was last summer, up in Kenai Fjords and up in the Arctic and so on. At any rate, this is a great time to have Great Outdoors Month in the centennial year of the National Park Service, which of course is bringing visibility to all of our public lands, not just our national parks. And so it's a great year to be making the case that you are making. And it's also a year where I think Congress is feeling the importance of our public lands like never before because of the visibility that we have around the centennial. This is an opportunity to make sure that public lands are on the radar of all Americans. The Find Your Park campaign, launched by the National Park Foundation, has had many billions of impressions. For those of you that are NPR listeners, we hear a little ditty of support for it. For those of you that are looking at anything on the web, you'll see Subaru commercials about reducing garbage in the national parks, but also around the Find Your Park campaign. You see PSAs in airports. But it is about find your park, find your public lands, no matter where it is. It's not just about the national parks. And so that is working. And it's going to be driving a lot of traffic to our public lands this summer. And your job, of course, is to help distribute that traffic and not have them all end up on the doors of Yellowstone in a giant traffic jam. It's our job, too. Let me talk for a minute about engaging that next generation and building support among constituents for whom public lands are not really on the radar. I want to acknowledge the passing of my good friend Doug Walker and just say that with support of the Forest Service and the agencies of the Interior, we're honoring Doug's tenacious work to streamline the process of getting underprivileged youth, particularly from inner cities, out into the great outdoors. It's been difficult sometimes to get through the morass of our permitting processes. There have been companies engaged in outdoor recreation that don't want competition, if you will, for those limited permits. It's not about that. It is about making the outdoors accessible and welcoming to everyone and making sure we're not throwing up barriers every step of the way so that when a nonprofit organization with a staff that makes next to no money wants to take a group of urban youth out, we don't throw barriers in their way to where it takes them years to get a permit. Those, I'm happy to say, through a secretarial order in Interior, are now baked into the plans of all the Interior agencies. And I know that Tom Tidwell and Joe and our colleagues at the Forest Service are working on the same thing. So that is terrific, and I think honors the tenacity of Doug Walker in making this case for really the last decade, because I've made those calls with him. I also want to just reference something that Mary Ellen referenced, and that is engaging youth. How do we do that? And it is a continuum, and it starts with let them play. Just let them play. And that is the play part of what Mary Ellen referenced, play, learn, serve, and work. That is a thought process that basically says, let's get kids outside playing again. We picked the YMCA as our national partner in the 50 Cities initiative, bringing Michelle Obama's Let's Move Outside to 50 cities around the country. So what's the YMCA doing? Well, any YMCA here? I think somebody was, no? Okay. YMCA is the largest provider of daycare services in the United States of America. Something like 6 million children a day go to the Y, and almost none of them do anything outside. The YMCA recognizes that this is an opportunity for them. And so they have worked with us as a national partner to make sure that that their programming brings kids outside in city parks, in local parks, in county parks, state parks, whatever's close by. And they are a convener. And I hope that some of you are involved in working with the YMCA in these cities just to get kids outside and engaged and more comfortable so that they aren't afraid to be outside for a variety of different reasons. And Lord knows, with the Zika virus and snakes and bears and all those fears that people have, exposure to the outdoors is really critical to help people understand that these are not insurmountable risks. They are part of all of us in nature. American Express Foundation supported that work, and we partnered also with AmeriCorps. So AmeriCorps, the YMCA, and the American Express Foundation are bringing this to 50 cities, and public land managers from a variety of agencies are participating to make sure that those urban places welcome young people as well. The next is learn. So if you get them out playing, there's no better classroom than the one with no walls, right? The best classroom is the one with no walls, and that's about every kid in a park working to coordinate curriculum to the extent we have it in our public lands around the 4th grade. And we picked the 4th grade because Department of Education recommended that. It's the year they still have homerooms. They're really excited and engaged in the outdoors. They aren't yet all snarled up in hormones, and you can still get to them. So it's also something we borrowed a bit from Canada. Canada, in some of their ski resorts, provides a free season pass to 5th graders. So a whole year is free skiing, which is a pretty significant financial investment. But of course, they hook the kids on skiing, and then they become skiers for life. Yes, I think that if we can get kids to download the passes and get out to our public lands and take their entire families with them, we believe that our parks and public lands will speak for themselves. But the best classroom is the one with no walls. The curriculum will be geared up that way. And for kids whose parents, for a variety of reasons, may not take them out, we hope that the classroom will. So your support on getting the word out on that would be great. We've had 2 million downloads, but we don't know if those are from 4th graders, and we don't know how many 4th graders are getting out, and we can't really track them for privacy reasons. But the word needs to get out, so I encourage you through your networks to make that happen. Then, of course, serve and work is what Mary Ellen was referring to, and that is the 21 CSC, 21st Century Conservation Service Corps, or Mary Ellen, if I had been around at the time it was named, I would have called it CCC 2.0. Because everybody knows the CCC, and everybody gets that 2.0 is like the next version. That's what we're talking about here. And while it's great that we've had 3,000, actually we've had something on the order of 25,000 in the last year on Department of Interior lands, I would have loved that to be 5 million. And when I talked to Ken Salazar when he was in this job, it's like, let's bring back the CCC while we're doing this stimulus work, because it really worked to not only fix up our public lands, which have a crumbling infrastructure, and you're all aware of that, but also it was a way to connect people to public lands that never left them. So there's those men, now in their 90s, still have an affinity for that park that they worked on. And it could be a state park, it could be a national park, it could be a local park. I mean, as we know, the CCC did a tremendous amount of work. The WPA at the same time, by the way, built the main interior building, a kitty corner across the street. And artists like Ansel Adams were put to work in telling the story of the Department of the Interior to give them work during the Franklin Roosevelt administration as well. So lots to do there, but it isn't the 1930s, and private money has helped support a lot of these efforts. So companies like American Eagle Outfitters, which was the first to the table, American Express, Coca-Cola, outdoor companies like REI and the North Face and Camelback, and a number of others have been the donors that have supported this work, and I think it is up to all of us to make sure that that continues into the future. We're certainly greasing the skids with our public land management agencies to welcome more and more volunteers. And that engages them also in work. So the serve and work is kind of intertwined. A lot of times the person leading your crew will be a young person. Might be an old person like me actually doing the work on the trails through a volunteer effort, and that's all great. That's what we want to see happening, and I love being told what to do by a young person. So we are committed to continuing to move this forward. I mentioned President Obama's support. Of course, we have tried to fill the gaps when Congress has not acted. The Omnibus Public Lands Management Act of 2009, you're all aware of that, 2 million acres of wilderness added. Not a lot done in between times until I think the logjam was broken with Boulder White Clouds, thanks to the good work of Congressman Mike Simpson from Idaho in particular. But also after that, the Sleeping Bear Dunes added some wilderness areas. So there has been some movement, but not too much. So we have, through executive action, named 23 national monuments under President Obama's watch. They are not just public lands and the great outdoors, although there are some of those. They also reflect a more full picture of the United States and what we represent. Places like Cesar Chavez National Monument in California, Harriet Tubman, the Buffalo Soldiers, Pullman, Honouliuli in Hawaii. These are places where underrepresented groups in the outdoors can hear part of their story, can associate that with our public lands management agencies that we hope will then provide a welcome to the broader array of public lands we have. Those that tell our culture, those that tell our history, but those also that celebrate the natural areas that so many of you are involved in. And of course, with stalwart support of Senator Feinstein, 3 new national monuments recently in California that speak very much to your customer base. You know, Castle Mountains, where you can see some incredible wildlife, Mojave Trails National Preserve, where you can do hunting and also get out into Route 66 and learn a bit about our history there, and then Sand to Snow, where I was as we made that announcement, doing a bit of hiking in some pretty incredible landscapes. So there's still some on the table. There's some controversial. You read about them all the time. I think that the ability to use the Antiquities Act has moved things forward, and that is very helpful, but we would love to have a greater partnership with our friends in Congress. Your comments to them about the areas that are important to you for outdoor recreation and tourism and your businesses are really, really important. Which brings me to something that's happening later this week or early next week, and that is the National Tourism and Travel Advisory Board is meeting. My colleague Penny Pritzker, the Secretary of Commerce, chairs that board. But this is all about welcoming people to our public lands from the United States and from foreign countries. The goal, 100 million visitors from foreign countries to the United States by 2021. We're well on our way to that goal. And of course, a lot of that's being driven by the great outdoors and by our public land assets. So the Centennial, and I see Will Shafroth in the back, the National Park Foundation has been a huge player in raising awareness of national parks, public service announcements, the Find Your Park campaign, the IMAX film that's out there. We did a big launch of Find Your Park in Times Square in New York City, where you could spin this big dial and figure out how far away any of our nation's national parks were from where you were standing. And we did the same thing down here on the National Mall. So that visibility is really helpful. Likewise, I'll be speaking at the IPW, which is the Travel and Tourism big conference that will also be highlighting international tourism. And last 4th of July, I wasn't here. I was in China with Ambassador Baucus, who basically turned the American Embassy in China into a giant display of national parks, inviting Chinese tourisms and actually many ambassadors from all over the world to come and experience a bit of the national parks in the U.S. Embassy and try and drive tourism that way. So lots going on as far as that's concerned. But we have a few challenges, so I'll just highlight a couple of those. Climate change is evident on our public lands everywhere, and I'm sure you see it. Last week I was out at the Soda Fire site in Idaho, where we had 280,000 acres of prime sagebrush habitat that burned. Looking at the restoration efforts there, we see droughts, of course, across particularly the West. That impacts paddle sports. It impacts, boating on places like Lake Powell and Lake Mead. Lake Mead's at its lowest level ever since 1937 when it was first being filled. We have big issues. Sea level rise, coastal erosion, Jamestown, which I was at just on the Virginia coast, historical artifacts washing into the sea. We're actually having to proactively excavate prehistoric sites to save those artifacts because we are absolutely seeing the impact of sea level rise already in that part of Virginia. And that's just one indication of what's happening across our landscape. So we all play a role. Of course, any of you involved in winter sports, snow machining, skiing, outdoor hockey, the Iditarod, all of these things are being dramatically impacted by what we see on the landscape. And it's going to take collective sustained action. It's going to take honesty and forthrightness and not pretending climate change is not real, but being out there saying, what can we do about it? How can we raise awareness? How can we adapt our business? How can we adapt our landscapes and provide the resources necessary so that we don't end up with wildfires and droughts that are fueling a cycle that's going to impact all of you? It's hard to go and have a lovely hike like last summer in the Olympic National Park, which is a rainforest when it's on fire, and you can't see anything because of the smoke. Of course, we saw the same things in some of our great public lands in California and in Alaska as well. So appreciate your help on doing that and raising awareness about the impact of your business, on your business of climate change, because I think it's all of our job to make sure that people know about that. Second, we've got a lot of pressures on development. So growing demands mean we have to be smarter about how we manage our lands. And we've done a lot of that. Desert Renewable Energy Conservation Plan, what areas should we be putting renewable energy in the California desert? What areas are critical habitat, water and view sheds for some of the beautiful public lands, and how do we manage all that together? The greater sage-grouse, protecting the sagebrush sea, which for hunters in particular is home to 350 species of animals. The greater sage-grouse, we prevented the need for listing under the Endangered Species Act because of this collective work. But really, it's the beginning of pulling up and saying, what do we need to protect this habitat? How can we have both smart development, recreation, and conservation all knit together by understanding those landscapes better? And of course, the Everglades is another example that's been going on for years. Critical ecosystem, very, very important for recreation, but also for the water supply of Florida, and also for the boaters offshore. We're sending a bunch of silt and stuff where it doesn't belong in the Gulf and in the Atlantic and not sending it down to regenerate the Everglades. Coastal erosion is going to be that much bigger of a problem, saltwater incursion into the water, and we're working hard on those things. And then at a smaller scale, places like Moab, Utah, where the outdoor recreation industry is partnering with the local county commissioners to say, how do we do a master leasing plan on BLM lands in Moab that's much smarter than what we've done before, that takes into account mountain biking potential, outdoor recreation potential, oil and gas potential, and all of those things, so we're not fighting each other. We're actually developing plans in advance. And the BLM is doing a lot of planning, changing its planning to do more of that in the future. So your voices are really important. I think when I was in one of your chairs, maybe not at this meeting, but running REI, I remember at one of the outdoor industry fly-ins to visit people in Washington, D.C., somebody used a phrase with me, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. So that certainly stuck with me. If you're not at the table, you are on the menu. There are plenty of industries out there. I like to say the outdoor industry is like 100 miles wide and a quarter of an inch deep, meaning lots and lots of small players with good grassroots impact, but not a lot of money. There are narrow and very deep industries, think like an oil well, for example, that are very powerful on Capitol Hill, and your voices need to be heard. You can bring the masses. They can bring the money. So make sure that you are engaging your constituents in the things that are important to you. Another challenge, we had an armed takeover of a bird sanctuary. The Malheur National Wildlife Refuge, as you know, was taken over by people with a very warped view of what the Constitution is and what public lands are. Contrary to what they'd say, public lands do belong to the public now, and we don't believe that taking them over by states or private landowners is a smart wave of the future. We think that people take for granted the fact that we fight fires, that we protect these landscapes, that we have expertise to address invasive species and those kinds of things. And I think it's taken for granted, oh, well, you keep doing that, federal government, but we want the land back to use for private uses. That makes no sense, and your voices are really important in this. I think it's a noisy minority, but there are people on Capitol Hill that are influenced and swayed by these voices, and I would just ask for your support of our public land managers who are in harm's way, who it's easy to take shots at, and we see some of that in this political campaign season. But they are doing as good a job as they can do with the limited resources that they have, and your support will be really important. Because if we don't have that, we risk losing access to the things that are important for you. Losing access to the land for camping and hunting and fishing and other forms of outdoor recreation. So that kind of brings up the next thing, which is we do have inadequate resources to do our job effectively. I will say that a governor of a western state said to me, I don't want to take over your public lands. You spend more in fighting fires in my state than I spend on education and criminal justice combined. So it gives you an idea of how much we do spend, but of course you see the crumbling facilities, and that's again where your voice is really important when you get to Capitol Hill. So to kind of wrap this up, I don't have to tell you that the outdoor recreation industry is a powerful economic force. The OIA's report of now a few years ago, $646 billion industry, every one of you in the room is a part of that in some way. I know on interior lands we had 420 million visitors last year. I don't know what the Forest Service had, Joe, but it's probably 145 million. Okay, Joe knows. So that is 565 million people. That's basically double the population of the United States, which means everybody got out at least twice. But what it means is we've had a lot of foreign visitors. We have people that enjoy access to these public lands, and that's really important. And of course, that drives your businesses as well. So your voices are really important. We are now working with Commerce Department's Bureau of Economic Analysis to institutionalize this as a legitimate part of the U.S. economy. So that's not done. That is started. It won't get done on my watch or Tom Vilsack's watch. So your voices on why this is important and why we go from these first preliminary steps to institutionalizing this is really, really critical, I think, to your business. So part of your discussion today, and this is where I'll wrap up, is around transitions. I'm in this job for another 8 months. Then I will be joining the ranks of your customers, and that is I'm taking a long, slow road trip to recharge my batteries someplace between Washington, D.C. and Seattle, Washington, depending on the weather, and I'll let the winds take me where they will. How do we transition? I'll give you an example. The Department of the Interior has something like 150 political appointees at every kind of level and 70,000 career staff. This work carries forward only if it makes sense to the career staff. I believe what we have done, as Mary Ellen pointed out, in engaging young people in working on public lands in this continuum of play, learn, serve, work, every kid in a park, our work with cities, with the YMCA, those are 2-year commitments, so they will continue at least for a year, but we're hopeful that it makes enough sense and people are hooked that that will continue. Your voices will help make sure that that work continues. Your connection to the career staffs in the public land management agencies will be important, as well as our job to make sure that they're teed up for success. And we will have a transition team in place of career staff in every agency. So, I won't say we won't skip a beat, because whomever comes into my job next is going to have to figure out what they're doing, and that takes a little time. In fact, you figure it out about the time you're going out the door. But That's kind of the way it works. And I would say, so that's one, is we're working on the career staff side. Make sure you are providing your input to them. Next is around engagement with elected officials, making sure people know your industry is important. And that is that reminder that if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. And then the third reminder is around grassroots. You've got a lot of people that love to do the things that you support. To the extent you can unlock those voices, so they're not just taking these public lands for granted, it will make a big difference. The Natural Resources Committee is run by an individual from Utah. Utah benefits tremendously from public lands in the state. But I think that Congressman Bishop and others from his state of Utah need to hear that from the people that enjoy those public lands that are driving so much into that economy. And that's just a real obvious example because of the Mighty Five and the marketing campaign around that state, but that's true in states across the country. Every single state now has a national park, thanks to First State in Delaware. It was the last one to join the ranks. The Centennial Year is a good place to, a good year to raise awareness of that, but your voices are really important. So your advocacy is going to make sure that our crown jewels, the things people don't come here for, to go to the Tower of London and see the crown jewels. They come here for our crown jewels, which are our natural areas and our history and our democracy and those things that make us special. Your voices for those places are incredibly important. And making sure that this room a generation from now is more reflective of the U.S. population is also critical, because if it isn't, our future elected leaders at every level that will be making decisions will not be prioritizing public lands, because there's never going to be enough money to go around for all the things that are on their plate. So that's up to all of us to do. So with that, I wish you a great conference. I thank you very much for being here and for your advocacy. Thanks so much.